Hi there,
Hi
and
there,
welcome
and
to How to
welcome to How to
Become a
Become
Great
a
Leader.
Great Leader.
Thank you for
Thank you for
deciding
deciding
to
to
join
join
my
my
free
free
online
online
webinar
webinar
today.
today.
You're
You're
obviously
obviously
interested in
interested in
developing yourself
developing
as a
yourself as
leader.
a leader.
So my
So
hope
my
is
hope
that what I
is that
share
what I
with
share
you
with you
is both
is both
informative
informative
and can
and
help
can
you
help you
somehow on
somehow
your own
on your
leadership
own
journey.
leadership journey.
So what's the journey today? I'm going to introduce myself and talk a little bit about my own leadership journey. We'll talk about what leadership is and what it isn't. Then we'll focus on how we learn and why that matters in developing ourselves as a leader and why it's important to understand that. We'll focus on how to discover the leader within ourselves and then ways that we can start to develop our own leadership. Finally, I'll give you an introduction to practice session, which is MDL Leadership's approach to developing leaders. My name's Murray Lynn. I'm the owner and founder of MDL Leadership. One of the reasons I'm so passionate about developing leaders goes back to my own leadership journey. As a 21-year-old kid, I was given my first management role. I was made an assistant director at the resort I was working at. I was given that role because I was one of the more capable ski instructors on their ski school, not because I had received any special training in leadership or how to manage a business. What I found was I was ill prepared to succeed in that role. As I grew and developed and got more education and more training, my career transitioned to being a management consultant. I would go into Fortune 500 companies and I would work with their managers and their leaders, helping them improve how their departments were performing. One of the things I soon realized was a lot of those managers and leaders were in the exact same position as that 21-year-old kid. They'd been put in that role because they were the best engineer, or because they were the best salesperson, or because they were the best mechanic. They'd received very little help in developing their own leadership skills and developing their management skills. It's a very different thing to lead a group of engineers and to manage an engineering department than it is to do the actual engineering. And I think we can do a much better job at giving people the tools so that they can succeed in leadership and management roles that they take on. So what is leadership about and what is this webinar about? Well, let's talk first about what it's not about. These are all things that, some leaders do, but it's not leadership. We're not going to talk about how to make more money. We're not going to talk about how to sell more products or how to be a better entrepreneur or how to become a politician and win an election. What we are going to focus on is how we lead and what leadership is and what it isn't. We're going to talk about learning and why that's important to our own leadership journey. We'll focus on how we can start to learn how to influence others without utilizing authority. How we can get people to do things without forcing them to do it. Then we'll focus on different leadership training methods and how we can become great leaders. So the first question we need to ask when we start talking about leadership, and this comes to mind with all of us, is, well, who is a great leader? If I'm trying to define what leadership is, well then, who might be a great place to start? So we can start to think about some famous and iconic figures. Are they people with great wealth? Are these people leaders because they've been able to accumulate lots of resources? Or have they been successful financially because they did something else that made them leaders? We can also think about politicians. Politicians are often referred to as leaders, but the fact that they won an election, is that what makes them a leader? Or is it something else that allowed them to win the election? And is that what makes them a leader? There are many iconic social figures that influence our ideas and our thoughts and the types of things that we should value. Do they influence us because of their fame and popularity, or do they influence us for some other reason? I think the real question we start to ask is leadership about being in a position? Is it about attaining great wealth, or being a CEO, or being the president of your country? Or is it about the actions that you take to influence others? If you agree that it's about the actions that we take to influence others, then we can start to ask ourselves, well, do I have the ability, and am I already a leader? If it's not about position, then we need to start to look at ourselves and say, who do I influence? Who are the people I already influence, and how do I influence them? I can guarantee we already influence our friends. That can be on some simple decisions like what movie are we going to watch, or where are we going to go for dinner tonight? But we can also influence them by helping them work through hard times, by offering advice, or by celebrating great times and being there to stand up with them at the most important times in their life. We influence our family. We influence our family through values, through how we treat each other, through how we help each other. Those are all methods that we use to have influence with other people. Within our organizations, there are many people who we work with who are our peers. They're on the same level as we are, yet we have influence over them by the way that we share ideas, by the way that we come to agreement on how to get things done, by the way that we support and help each other, and by the way that we learn how to succeed together. We can also influence our boss. Now, many people may not believe this is possible. It's our boss's job to set expectations with us, and it's up to us to stand up and fulfill those expectations. But we also set expectations with our boss. We also have the ability to influence their expectations, and we can influence them through our actions and through our conversations with them and how we treat each other. It's clear with these four groups, there's no authority involved, yet we can have influence. And we can all probably think of many different ways that we influence each of these four groups. With direct reports, it's obvious we have some authority with that group. And the question we need to ask ourselves is, using our authority all the time the best way to go about getting them to do the things we need them to do? Or can we utilize the methods that we use with our friends, our family, our peers, and our boss to influence without authority? And will that get us better results with our direct reports? Oftentimes it does. We influence our clients as well by helping them make better decisions about our products and our services and how to best utilize them. We influence our suppliers by setting expectations with them and by working together so that not only do we succeed, but they succeed as well. I think the key question to start to ask yourself is, well, who else do I influence? Who's within my circle of influence? If I have a circle of influence, then I'm already a leader. And so am I doing the best job that I can as a leader within that circle of influence? How do I, if I want to grow my circle of influence, how do I go about doing that? Can I do that by becoming a better leader? If we all have the capacity to lead by influencing others, then we all have the ability to become better leaders. We all have the ability to improve our leadership. Leadership is a skill. It's about action. It's about the actions that we take to influence others. So if it's a skill like playing the piano or skiing or playing basketball or coding, all things that can be learned, leadership can be learned as well. So if that's the case, then how do we learn to be great at the art of influence? So let's focus a little bit here on learning. If we're trying to acquire a skill, one of the things we want to understand are what are the different ways that we can go about learning, and what are the different ways that each of us learn. There are 4 main learning styles that have been identified with skill acquisition. The first one that we'll talk about is watching. This is when you see somebody do something and then you try and emulate exactly what they do. This might be watching someone hit a tennis ball and then going and trying to copy the movement so that you hit the tennis ball in the same way. Or it might be watching someone do a math problem on the board and then you emulate that by doing the same math problem yourself or applying those principles to a different math problem. It could be by watching somebody who you admire as a leader and seeing what they do and trying to emulate them. Not be them, but be like them. That's one method of learning. Another method of learning is through doing. So if you can imagine the person who gets a new computer software program, and instead of going through all the instructions, what they do is they sit down and they fiddle with the program, they play with it, they see what it does, they try different things, and that's how they learn. They don't need the full explanation up front. In fact, that doesn't help them. What they need is they need to get in and they need to start doing. And through the act of doing, they can then start to understand with feedback what works, what doesn't work, and then they can turn around and usually explain that to other people. And this works the same way with leadership. There are people who learn by doing. Now they'll make mistakes, but they need to start doing early so that they develop their leadership skills. Then there are people who learn through feeling. Some people, if you're learning how to ski, you might want to understand at what point in the turn will you start to feel pressure under your foot, or what's it going to feel like as you move through the powder. What should it feel like? As we apply that to leadership, the things we want to start to think about is, how is this behavior going to make me feel? How should I feel when I'm using this behavior? If I'm trying to influence someone else, how is it going to make them feel? And how am I trying to make them feel? And the last type of learner is the thinker. This is the person that does go through the full instruction manual. This is the person that when they buy a new car, they read the owner's manual front to back so that they understand how the car works. When it comes to developing their leadership, they're going to want to know the theory. They're going to want to know everything there is they can know about that leadership behavior so that they feel more comfortable in trying to apply it. Now, all of us have an ability to learn through all 4 of these different leadership styles. Yet we typically have 1 or 2 dominant learning styles. I know for myself, for example, my dominant learning styles are observing and doing. I've figured that out because I know when I have been working on developing certain skills that I'm now very capable at, that those were the 2 ways that I had most success. When I was trying to become an expert skier, I went out and I watched other expert skiers and then I emulated what they did. As I was working on being a better teacher, I went out and I taught people. I did the teaching and I learned from that. And that helped me become better. And it helped me then go back and understand what it was I was reading about and thinking about before. Now, this learning wasn't void of feedback. Feedback was necessary, but the feedback needed to be not only verbal feedback, but the nonverbal feedback that I got from myself. So how can you go about figuring out what your own dominant learning style is? Well, if you can always take a survey, that can help. But there are other ways you can go about getting feedback. If you have a teacher or a coach or a mentor within your own career right now, they can help you. If you already have someone giving you feedback, one of the things you can ask them is, what do you think my dominant learning style is? That might be a great conversation for you to have, because not only will it help you understand how you learn better, it will help that person who's there helping you understand how they can best go about helping you. The last way you can figure out what's your dominant learning style is through self-observation. So how do you do this? Well, ask yourself, take an activity that you're already really good at, and ask yourself the question, how did I learn to do that? Did you have a teacher or a coach? If you didn't have a teacher or a coach, then likely there was some doing involved. You had to do before you understood. If you had a teacher or a coach, you can also ask, well, what methods did they use that helped you to get it? To say, aha, now I know how to do this. Did they use lots of visual demonstrations? Were they very task-oriented, which would tell you you learn through doing? What were the things that succeeded with you? Being able to ask yourself that question will help you determine how you learn. Why is that important for leadership? Because if you don't know how you learn, you don't know the best methods that you should take to go about developing your own leadership. So once you've understood how you go about learning, the next question to ask is, well, how do we become great at the art of influence? How do we become great leaders? If you Google leadership, you'll get 358 million results. So the question starts to become, which is the right model? That can be really confusing. There are lots of blogs, lots of articles, lots of books out there. Many of them have many, many similarities. There are differences within all of them. The challenge becomes, how do you decide which is the right one? Which is the method that works? But I think the real challenge isn't which is the method that works. It's figuring out which is the method that's right for you. Which model will work for you? We are all different. We're all individuals. We all have our own strengths. Trying to emulate a model of leadership that doesn't fit within ourselves will not likely allow us to become successful. It will not allow us to become great leaders. What all great leaders are good at, while there are some common behaviors that they exhibit as leaders, but what they all do is they are able to identify their own strengths. They identify their own leadership strengths. They're able to refine those strengths. They're able to identify the types of behaviors that they need to be developing to support those strengths. And then as they're building teams around them, they identify the types of leadership attributes that they need to have on their teams that will complement them. They all go and build their own leadership guiding principles. Their personal leadership guiding principles. This gives them a model that they can go back and then say, how am I doing? I'm comparing myself to how I want to be as a leader. But it's personal, it's theirs. Sure, they use some of the ideas and influence from others, but they have that personal touchstone that they can go back to as a guide that helps them develop their own leadership skills within their context based on their strengths. They don't focus on fixing their weaknesses. Yes, if there's something glaring, if there's a real problem, you have to fix that. But if you really want to become great at something, you focus on refining those strengths and those skills that you possess that you're most likely able to become expert at. So how do you then go about doing that? What are the methods and what are the differences between the methods? One of the things you can look at when you're looking at different methodologies to develop your own leadership is it prescriptive or is it collaborative? I think the main difference between these two is that a prescriptive method is all about the teacher. It's not about you. It's about the teacher telling you what they know. This can be helpful, but the real question you have to ask yourself is, does that develop you? Does that develop your skill set? The other method is a more collaborative method. This is focused on you. It's focused on where you are within your journey and helping you discover the best answers. If you're in a group setting, you're discovering the best answers together. It's focused on your learning style. It's focused on how you develop skills. It's focused on the skills that you need to develop. So there are two approaches that you can take. They can be complementary and they can work together, but you have to understand which is which. So if we look at some of the main methods that are used today to develop our leadership, we can start to break it down and understand what's the most effective and how does it work. Reading is one of the most common ways that people will go about developing their leadership. Walk into any business section in your local bookstore and you will see thousands of books on how to become a better leader. Now, it's not the most effective method for developing your leadership, not to say that you shouldn't do it. I read leadership books all the time. But for me, it's not a tool to develop my leadership. It's a tool to broaden my understanding. It's a tool to give me ideas so that when I do go out and practice or when I do watch other leaders, I have more visibility. I don't pick books and say, here's the right one and here's the wrong one. Leadership is more nuanced than that. So what I try and do is broaden my understanding. As a pedagogical method, reading is prescriptive. It's the author telling you something about leadership. You can also go and take online courses, and there are thousands of them out there. The majority of these online courses are also prescriptive. So the question you have to ask yourself is this going to be very effective in developing my own leadership? Now, there might be a community around it where you could, a forum where you can discuss different attributes of leadership, but it's not much more effective than reading. It's going to cost you more than reading a book, yet it's quite prescriptive. You can also go and take a seminar or see a presentation, but if you sit within a room of 250 people and there's a panel of politicians or business leaders or sports figures up front telling you about their own journey, you're not getting much feedback about how you're doing in your own leadership journey that's within your context. Again, it's prescriptive. There might be some good ideas that come out of it. It might be entertaining for a couple of hours. There might be some useful anecdotes that you can use. But the question is that really developing your leadership skills? One of the best methods for developing your leadership skills is one-on-one coaching. Why is it so effective? Because it's collaborative, because you're working within your context as a leader, because a coach can help you focus on the skills that you want to develop. They can help you focus on refining your strengths. They can help you figure out where it's appropriate to use different behaviors at different times. A coach can be the most effective way of developing your own leadership skills. The problem with one-on-one coaching is it's expensive. So this is where practice session comes in. Practice session is an online hybrid between coaching and the online course and seminar presentation. We're going to talk a little bit about what practice session is and how we do that here. We keep it between 5 and 10 participants, so you have the feedback of the coach, but you also will have the opportunity to share feedback and learn together with one another. So it becomes very collaborative, where you can start to develop your own leadership skills, your own set of leadership guiding principles, but with the feedback and support of others in your group. The idea behind practice session is to help you start to fill your toolbox so that as different situations that require your ability to lead come in front of you, you're able to go into that toolbox and use the appropriate tool at the appropriate moment. So, practice session, let's talk about it. It's an 8-week collaborative practice leadership development. Each session is limited to 5 to 10 participants. I developed this by working with leaders in the oil field in Alaska. One of the reasons I decided to turn this into a workshop type program is because of how engaging and effective this method was. Because I didn't go about telling them what leadership was, I helped them discover their own leader within. And what was incredible to see was how this not only turned them around as leaders, but it changed the behavior and the performance of their teams. So what do we do over the 8 weeks? Well, first off, we're going to co-create a model of effective leadership. This allows you to put leadership into your own language in your own context. From that, we'll have you do a self-evaluation, and we'll also get each person in the group to select what leadership behavior they want to start to focus on. Over the next week, we'll do 3 deep dives. And this will be based on those leadership behaviors that the group has chosen, and we'll deep dive, not into everyone, but just into a few, so that we can broaden our understanding of that behavior and how to utilize it and where it's appropriate to utilize it. We'll also give you a chance to practice it within the session so that you can utilize that as a tool. We'll also do 3 applied practice assignments. You might think, oh, assignment, more work, I'm already too busy at work. It's applied practice because it's meant for you to, either in your volunteer work or within your professional life or at home, take some of the things you're learning and working on in practice session and apply it within your world right now. It's not an extra, it's a part of. It's about changing the way you lead and the way you work with other people. You'll come back to the group, and we'll do this 3 times, where once you've tried to apply that leadership method, we'll talk about it. We'll do a feedback session where you'll get to describe what happened, what worked, what didn't work, and get feedback from other people within the group and from myself. The idea behind this is we're developing a methodology for you where you can carry on and continue to develop your own leadership beyond practice session. Towards the end of practice session, we'll introduce you to what a framework for leadership guiding principles looks like. This is where there'll be some extra work where you go and develop your own leadership guiding principles. In the very last session, you'll come back and each of us will introduce our leadership guiding principles to the rest of the group and receive feedback. The idea behind this is that when you leave practice session or when you finish the 8 weeks, you have your own set of leadership guiding principles and you have a method to go and develop and practice. You have a way to go and find feedback. So you have a great launching point for your own leadership journey. So if you want to get involved in practice session, how do you do that? Well, you can contact us at info@mdlleadership.33mail.com and we'll let you know when the next practice session is scheduled to start. How are we going to conduct this and how are we going to make this collaborative? We are using a new online collaborative classroom software out of the education sector called Moodle. This allows us to run workshops online as if we were all in the same room together. In that email, once we have the next practice session scheduled and available for you, you'll be able to pay directly with PayPal, and you can join us for our next practice session. I hope to see you then. Thanks.